Hey Patrick, how you doing?
Doing well, Richard. How are you, man?
Yes, I'm good. Good to see you. You
Good.
gearing up for DC next week?
I am. I'm likely only gonna be in town for like 36 hours though. It might be a bit of a whirlwind.
Yeah. I'm a bit gutted. We can't make it this year. We went last year. We always go, but it's one of my favorite events in the calendar year. But can't make it. So yeah, have a good time. Hopefully, we'll get out to the Space Symposium in Colorado, and Chris is here too. How you doing, Chris?
Oh man, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. You?
Doing great. Good to see you, man.
Good. Good to see you both. So yeah, look, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate it. It'd be great if you could kick things off, take us back from the early days of Patrick and Chris, where you started in life, where you grew up, that sort of thing, and eventually how you guys found your way into your early career. I think it's NRO and Orbital ATK.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my early story, I think is easiest to talk about from the standpoint
Yeah.
of, what I always envisioned myself working on, which, to be honest, was always something very futuristic, very space centric. So, of course, I go to college, and the first thing I do is major in aerospace engineering, which isn't always the easiest major, but definitely super rewarding. Did my undergrad at MIT, and I think one of the things that was super kind of valuable to me is I had a pretty big contingent in my undergrad of folks that worked in the defense industry, professors, postdocs. The labs were supporting government contracts, and so it was pretty natural to come out of that community and then kind of transition into what was orbital sciences when I first joined. Um, Later, about 6 years later, they merged with Orbital ATK, and actually that was a project I got to work on. But I was very technical early on. Worked on classified satellite programs, worked on rocket programs, did a bunch of business development work as well in there, and it was all in line with kind of this vision I created for myself, honestly, as a kid, to be working in the space industry on stuff that leaves the Earth and either orbits it or goes off and explores stuff. And I also had a short stint at JPL, NASA JPL, where I got to work on some of the planetary exploration missions that they do. And so that was really my transition. And of course, it's all kind of come to head here at Trustpoint, which we'll talk about. But that's the early days for me.
Awesome. Thank you. And yourself, Chris? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, it's my first time on a video call. We I've only spent about half my career in the space industry, right? I kind of fell into it when I was working for the federal government. I was a DoD civilian doing, RF analytics work, and then found my way at the NRO, leading research and development for SIGINT spacecraft. It was the first time I had ever, had a chance to work with satellites and their technology. And I quickly learned, or had to quickly learn, how small satellites were being used by the government for government purposes, and through that learned how they were being used commercially. 2010 was when I started at the NRO, but by 2015 I was ready to hop out and start something new, using my knowledge from those small sat engagements. And I started Hawkeye 360 in 2015. It's about the time I met Patrick. We'd get together and brainstorm over business ideas related to new space technologies.
Yeah.
And after being at Hawkeye for 5 years, had the opportunity to join Patrick on building something even bigger and better. And that's where Trustpoint got its start.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to unpack that story as well. Like, how did that come to fruition? I know you mentioned there, Chris, a couple of times you guys would connect and brainstorm these new space ideas. I'd like to hear about, Trustpoint and what you guys do and how you fit into the space ecosystem. But how did the co-founder story happen? How did that come to fruition?
Yeah. So, Chris and I did. We used to get together a bunch when we were both in the DC area,
Yeah.
and do exactly that. Brainstorm ideas of what the next kind of big impactful opportunity is in the space sector. Out of the back end of that, I like to think that I maybe helped with a few pointers here and there before Hawkeye got founded. But Chris went off and founded Hawkeye. Following a bunch of those meetings, and of course he'd been working on that type of stuff for a while. But for kind of us coming back together, a number of years later, the story kind of started, at least on my side, I was in Silicon Valley. I was working for a satellite manufacturing company. I'd helped them pivot from Earth observation to satellite manufacturing. This is Astro Digital, and we had gone through by 2019. We'd gone through kind of our first 5 or 6 contracts of building turnkey satellite missions for third parties, both commercial and government. And what I'd seen in that experience is there was a ton of kind of venture capital, innovation love happening across the space sector in all these different areas. We got launch, we got Earth observation that had both optical and SAR. We saw communications being innovated and disrupted, IoT, broadband, even starting to see some early laser comm work, which I got to take a part in as well. And that was fantastic. But I noticed there's a missing application in that portfolio. And that was strong innovation at the space segment in the GPS world, right? Which is the
Yeah.
largest space segment out there. It's a $250 billion a year market, by the way. Compare
Wow.
that to like launch and satellite telecom and
Yeah.
Earth observation. It's bigger than all of those combined as a standalone. And so, as an entrepreneurial minded person, I was, of course, helping, build something at Astro Digital, but I recognized that there was a much bigger opportunity that checked a bunch of key boxes for me personally. One is something that was in need of a restart. It was sort of I don't want to use the word stale because the GPS constellation is a fantastic system, but it dates back to the 1970s. There are technical decisions
Yeah.
in the GPS constellation that are over 50 years old, right? And it's worked phenomenal for decades, but we need a reboot. And so I saw this disruption opportunity coupled with a very large and healthy market, 250 billion a year, coupled with a bunch of nascent applications that are about to make that market grow even faster. Self-driving cars, drone delivery, urban air mobility. And it all matched up with my personal experience in the aerospace sector, which was kind of operating at the nexus of technical, regulatory, and financial aspects of this business. So it made complete sense. It was just kind of like a light bulb. Holy crap, there's a great opportunity here. I got to figure this out. And then, of course, when you're picking co-founders and early teammates, it's best to draw from people people you can trust, that you
Yeah.
can go hop in a foxhole with. And Chris is on a short list for that, and we very quickly kind of keyed in on it. Chris's entry point to the same project sort of came from a different direction, though, and I'll let him tell that story.
So yeah, thanks, Patrick. I'm unmuted. Awesome. When I was at Hawkeye, Hawkeye was building a commercial RF analytics company, launching satellites, detecting RF coming off the ground, figuring out what people were interested in, what products people cared about in the RF geolocation space. And one of the ones that got a ton of traction and a lot of interest was the GPS interference monitoring bit. So customers, government, commercial customers were paying to learn more about where GPS interference was taking place. And I frankly hadn't been tracking that as a problem before we were offering it and selling it as a product. So the opportunity after talking to Patrick to do something about the problem was something I certainly hadn't expected while I was at Hawkeye. But frankly, the phase of a company that I enjoy the most is the early stage, right? Starting with nothing but a great idea and turning it into a valuable business. The early stages, the first 5, 10, 25 people, like I love that phase. And that's sort of where Trustpoint is right now. So was excited to take from the lessons learned at Hawkeye. Not every startup is executed perfectly. You learn quite a bit by going through the motions and taking those experiences and bringing those to Trustpoint. Joining Patrick was the start of it for me.
Awesome. And talk us through Trustpoint. What do you guys do in this disruptive model? Because I think most people, I guess, in tune with the whole purpose of this podcast, trying to make space accessible. As soon as people hear GPS, they think the satellite navigation system in their car, TomTom, Uber, these types of things. So yeah, talk us through what you guys do and how you fit into the space ecosystem.
No, absolutely. So Trustpoint is a commercial GPS provider. So we'll be building, launching and operating a constellation of low Earth orbiting satellites to provide new, better, high performance GPS signals down to space. When people think of GPS, they think of navigating in a car or Google Maps or Apple Maps on their phone. But the source of that solution, right, where that app tells you where you are, is combining signals coming down from space from multiple satellites, right? It's essentially the simple explanation is all of these satellites in space, the GPS constellation, they all transmit little text messages on a persistent basis. Those text messages include the time at the satellite and the position of the satellite. And so when you receive it on the ground, you can look at all this data across multiple satellites, do a little bit of linear algebra, and figure out where you are on the surface of the earth from that math, right? It's just a phenomenal sort of algorithm, to be honest, right? And the math is surprisingly simple at the base level to do this, right? This isn't some massive computational requirement to derive your position on the planet. So it's a phenomenal system. The thing I mentioned earlier is that the technology and the architecture decisions date back to the 1970s, and the decisions they made then were perfect for that time frame.
Yeah.
But so much has happened in 50 years. Right. So really what Trustpoint is doing in building and operating a new constellation, we're able to upgrade the entire tech stack. And one of the things we do point out is in the GPS world, there's been a lot of innovation at the receiver level, right? Our phones are updated every year, every 2 years, 3 years. Even other GPS receivers in our cars, they get refreshed every couple of years. The constellations that do GPS, and there's the US one, there's a European one, a Russian one, a Chinese one, a few regional ones. They all sort of have this 1970s heritage. Some of the constellations themselves are younger. Some of the satellites are definitely younger, but they all tie back to a bunch of fundamental decisions. We've sort of take the lessons learned in the last 50 years, but threw out the rule book and said, hey, if we got a clean sheet, we know what's worked in the past. We know what the new threats are to GPS, of which there's a lot. There's a giant rise in jamming and spoofing and other vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
We know what the new applications are, right? In the 1970s, they weren't designing GPS for self-driving cars and deep in urban canyons or, precision autonomously flown drones. But today we can design Trustpoint to do that. And while receivers have innovated a lot, as I've mentioned, every couple of years you get new receiver technology. The space segment hasn't. And so our position is really innovating and updating that space segment, providing new signals, similar algorithms to derive position, but new signals down to Earth that are going to be higher power, better accuracy, more secure, and more accessible when it comes down to it.
What do you think that reason is? I think a lot of people that will listen to this will go, whoa, this is like a huge ecosystem, 250 billion in revenue. Why has the tech stack not been looked at? Why has it not been really updated since the 70s? Why do you think that is?
So I think there's kind of a confluence of three things. The first one is satellite costs and launch costs, right? As everyone in our sector knows, it's really only been in the last kind of 5 to 10 years that technologies have stabilized around low cost capability to get to space and low cost capability to operate in space, right? So if you were to try to do the project Chris and I are working on a decade ago or like 20 years ago, it's a multi-billion-dollar proposition. That is a huge lift. I mean, you go back to the 1990s, there was a mega constellation that the Microsoft founders were working on called Teledesic. The price points were in the $7 to $10 billion range. Even the small constellations, quote unquote, like Iridium and Global Star, were in the multi-billion dollar price points. Moving to low Earth orbit, you need a lot of satellites, hundreds, right? And we're targeting the mid 300 range for our constellation. And if you did it the old way, it would cost billions and billions of dollars. It's only recently that a company like Trustpoint, with a small, high-performing team, which I've absolutely loved working with, can build something that is what I would say affordable from the standpoint of what this is. And just one more data point, a GPS satellite today, built and operated by the U.S. Space Force, is $500 million. Okay. Wow. That makes the entire constellation like $15 billion if you've got 30 satellites up there. Trustpoint's building spacecraft with our partners and payloads and getting them launched into orbit, again with a partner network, for on track to get to something that's like $250,000 per satellite. Okay, so we're going from 500 million down to $250,000, and that's a sort of a new thing, right? I think the other side of this is the venture world has become more comfortable with space in general, but also the world of of autonomy has really driven interest in the GPS sector, right? Navigation without humans in the loop is a cool thing to do today, right? It's hot. Yeah. It's needed across sectors. And so you see two things. You see an enablement of new technologies and ecosystems to support this, as well as a real strong pull from a ton of different markets for this capability. So I think today is really the first time it's been an option, but it's also the first time that everyone's really hungry for it. And that's why we haven't seen it earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's your guys' thoughts on the industry overall, GPS, PNT? Like, what's your thoughts on the current landscape as it is now, and with the evolution of AI and all this type of stuff? How do you see that evolving over the next 5 years? I know you mentioned a bit there that the obvious thing is it's going to cost less, but how do you see that whole technology evolving over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, Patrick, why don't I talk a bit about GPS, then I'll hand it off to you to talk about the AI piece. I mean, in general, the U.S. government is embracing commercial solutions that augment and support functions that have historically been provided by the government for the U.S. For GPS, future solutions are going to absolutely take signals from multiple GNSS constellations, right? They're already doing that today with GPS, Galileo. We picture a world where Trustpoint's brought in as an alternative, an additional signal to offer better performance, better security, better redundancy. And that's going to give a more consistent service for the applications that Patrick was mentioning. So the vision for the future of GNSS is a continuation of the government's vision for buy if you can, build if you must, with Trustpoint offering something for the U.S. government to buy. But at its core, our bigger market is the commercial market, with billions and billions of GNSS-enabled devices out there already today. Our path to success in getting access to that major market is partnering with the folks that are already building the chips and the receivers today, encouraging them, convincing them that including Trustpoint is going to give them a better product to get into the user equipment. So that's our vision for what GNSS becomes in the future, with Trustpoint as an essential part of it.
Awesome.
On the AI front, obviously AI is in all the headlines, and it's kind of the hot topic today. But if you fundamentally kind of generalize what AI does for us, is it's an independent decision-making technology, right? There's no human in the loop. It's making decisions, and that decision can take a lot of forms. It can make on, what line of code to write next, to what inputs into a control system of a car to take next based on sensors, right? And so fundamentally, AI is this decision-making capability. And of course, it plays a massive role in the world of autonomous transportation, right? And I think that's where Trustpoint and AI will intersect mostly. We, of course, have plenty of ways to roll AI into what we're working on. I'm not going to get into that because there's a lot of proprietary there. However, on the end use scenario, what we're providing to all of these AIs in the autonomous navigation space is better inputs, right? There's often this phrase that folks in the engineering world use, especially in the control systems world. It's sort of a garbage in, garbage out type situation, right? AI is intended to make the output of a system better without human participation. Yeah. But if you don't give it good data or good inputs, it still has a really hard time. And so Trustpoint's role is improving the inputs to all of these AI-based systems. And so we're going to see increases and improvements across the board, land, air, and maritime applications and autonomy that leverage AI by what Trustpoint's building. And I think that's the intersection. We're an enabler of a lot of these applications to scale, right? And that's another thing. We see self-driving cars in a handful of cities in limited fleets, right? Why don't we see thousands or hundreds of thousands of vehicles on the road today, right? And there's a bunch of reasons why. And one of those is navigation is hard. Navigation at scale without humans in a high safety critical of life environment where people's lives and property damage is a real outcome of a bad day is hard. And they need the best data possible, and Trustpoint's going to be one of those inputs.
I know you guys both just kind of touched on it there, both individually, but would you say that's the part of the industry you see the most growth happening with this GPS technology, in that autonomous systems part of the sector, with all these autonomous driving vehicles like you mentioned, and the autonomous, I didn't actually realize myself until a few months ago how big the autonomous transportation services was as well. So is that where you guys see the biggest area of growth when it comes to the GPS tech?
Yeah, I think we do. On the commercial side, maybe I'll let Chris talk about the defense side. But on the commercial side, we're really trying to have a you know a, an expanded set of capabilities in the autonomous world, and they're all finding the same problems that I just talked about. So I think the pull from autonomy, and it's not just cars, it's planes, it's drones, it's industrials. Think of mining, think of construction. All of these sectors, almost every sector, can be improved by more autonomy.
Yeah.
And so in that case, I think we play a massive role in the commercial side.
Yeah, and then when we've seen the same on the defense side as well. Every application on the commercial side has a corollary on the defense side, whether it's uh, uh, positioning for space, positioning for terrestrial, positioning for handheld. All those have a commercial need as well as a defense need. Defense folks have been very explicit about their assured PNT needs, to the point of not only stating their challenges, but seeking innovation and funding contracts that are ultimately sourcing innovation, including that from Trustpoint. So we've had tremendous success engaging, particularly the armed forces on their innovation initiatives related to PNT, and our hope and our efforts is toward making sure they have a solution before, frankly, before they really need it. Right? That's the goal.
Awesome. And what is it you two have come? I hear in both of your stories. Obviously, Chris, you got into the space sector from the government. Patrick, it seemed like it was destiny from you from a very early age on. Now that you guys have been in the industry for so long, what is it you've come to love most about being in the space industry?
You want to start, Patrick?
Sure.
Yeah. So at its core, I like to say that the space community is ironically small, right? Like
Yeah.
the space is massive and the applications are massive, and yet the events we participate in and the circles in which we run, inevitably turn up the same personalities who are making a difference within the industry. So it's become a tremendous community to be a part of. Seeing it evolve over the years has been tremendous. From attending the SmallSat conference in Logan, Utah in 2012, to today, right? Just seeing not only the innovation but the business application of the technology being developed has been tremendous, and I'm feel privileged to be part of that ride.
Yeah.
Love it.
I think for me, it's sort of it's the impact of space that really gets me going. I think space solves big global problems, right? And there's a ton of fantastic businesses or technologies that folks can choose to work on. I think the thing that gets me is the fact that if and when Trustpoint succeeds, right, it might be one of the most impactful satellite constellations out there, right? Now, Starlink is fantastic. Thousands of satellites bringing broadband to millions of customers. But GPS is going to be for billions of customers, right?
Yeah.
And billions of people need it and billions of people use it today. That's not the same for satellite broadband, right? And that's what gets me excited, right? And it's not just, hey, I'm providing this capability so Google Maps works better when you're trying to navigate to happy hour at a bar you've never been to, right? We're enabling the future, right?
Yeah.
What we're working on is, building towards what it's like to be in the Jetsons, if anyone can remember what that cartoon was like back in the day. Flying cars, robots navigating autonomously throughout cities. Oh man, there's just so many like cool things you can go do in that future we dream about, and playing a part in that, I think is what it is. So it's really just like that scale of impact that space does for me.
Yeah, absolutely love it. And on that, I guess on that theme of the future and sustaining all this exciting growth and all these different technology facets, one of the purposes of this podcast, as you know, is to try and make space more accessible for everyone, to try and drive that growth. And you probably hear this yourselves, like when we go to the events, like Chris mentioned there, the SmallSat in Utah and stuff, that everyone's excited, which is great. Everyone's kind of on a common mission, all these space companies growing. It's not really getting any easier, I would say, to like find the talent to sustain that growth. So I think sooner or later we're probably going to hit ahead. And what do you feel we could and should be doing, maybe at like a grassroots level, in the classrooms, to try and spread the message a little better and educate people to make it more accessible? And I'm not just talking about the kids here too. That's obviously very important. But even in different industries, automotive or medical, whatever it is. And I don't know about you guys, I've only been doing this 6 years, but still now, when I speak to friends and family, as soon as I mention space, the immediate perception is astronauts, rocket scientists, astrophysicists, and that is it. So, yeah, what do you think we could be doing differently to try and encourage the next generation of space talent?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the most important thing to do from the get-go is to dispel the myth that space requires some level of specific education and that all others are excluded, right? We have an advisor who comes from the mining industry, right? And he has made it his mission to find links between mining and space. Coming at it from I'll call it a mining first approach. I've served as a mentor to these space startups who are first and foremost experts in the medical field or agriculture, and they're finding ways to apply their core knowledge to space, because every Earth-based discipline has a corollary in microgravity, right? And we intend I appreciate them finding ways to take advantage of that from a different angle. Generally, Trustpoint brings interns into our company every summer. We've had a tremendous success converting folks who have spent their summers with us, most often in technical fields, but perhaps never any real world space experience yet. We throw them in as interns, we get them hands-on, we send them to integrate spacecraft with our partners, and then in 3 cases we brought folks on full-time after having them as summer interns. So
awesome.
I'd like to think that's a function of Trustpoint being a tremendous opportunity for folks looking to start their careers, but it's as much just the excitement of space for folks who are experiencing it for the first time.
Absolutely.
I think Chris hit it great. I don't know if I have any other comments there.
No, awesome. And I guess from a keeping on that theme of the next generation in terms of like failures and successes, obviously you guys have been through different journeys, different companies, different backgrounds and stuff. I think with that whole perception of like space is this big scary thing and you have to have a PhD and all that kind of stuff, I think with all the social media platforms today, everybody sees like the highlight reel of success, right? Like they see the
Sure.
they see like the finish line, the end goal. Nobody sees like the hard stuff and like the grind and the sacrifice and all that kind of stuff. So what would you say is your guys' biggest lessons learned through your career, and what do you learn from it? And on the other side of that coin, what's your biggest achievement today?
Yeah. So let me start with you can call it a failure. It's really a massive lesson learned.
Yeah.
And luckily it happened early in my career. So and it wasn't necessarily a personal outcome, but it was a team outcome. And I was heavily integrated in a team. So I was working a very large, sophisticated proposal for a government contract when I was at Orbital Sciences. I can't get into the details because some of the work was classified, but it was a very complex problem. And in these government proposals, they're usually big proposals, sometimes thousands of pages. And you have to prove to the government that what you're building works the best out of the options, is the best price point, and solves their problem with the least risk, right? And there's all these criteria. In fact, there's a whole manual you usually get with the RFP that says, this is how we're going to grade you, right? And so you kind of know what the rubric is ahead of time, and it takes a ton of work to go after that. And I think that experience, which was like a 7-month proposal drafting exercise with probably 40 people, we absolutely had the best tech and absolutely had the best price out of all the competition. What we did not account for is the regulatory complexity of any aerospace business, right? And I'll draw this back. You need good tech, a good financial plan, and a good regulatory or kind of government interface plan, right? There's a lot of industries that carry these three factors, but in space in particular, you can't solve these problems by only solving one axis, right? You can't just come up with the best technical solution if you can't pay for it. You can't come up with a cheap solution, right? If the tech doesn't work, or maybe the tech and the pricing is good, but you can't get it past the regulators, or for some reason you can't get it past, the funding sources and all the politics that goes into it. And so our effort was phenomenal. Our proposal was phenomenal. But the game had an extra layer, another dimension that I think our team failed to properly account for. And we got beat out by a big prime. And the big primes are known for their sophistication in these proposal work. And they absolutely had worse tech. They absolutely had an objectively higher price.
Yeah.
But they played the game in a few other axes. And I think that's the lesson learned. In aerospace, you cannot optimize along a single axis. You must account for the technology, the financial and capital requirements, and then this whole political regulatory side of things. And that can be the DoD. But in GPS, for instance, it's our interfacing with both US and international entities that regulate transportation and trade and spectrum and space assets. Even the finance aspects of this have regulatory requirements. And so my lessons learned is you must account for all of it before you've determined what the optimal solution is. And if you don't, you're going to find yourself, up a creek without a paddle, and you're going to have a hard day ahead of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's the lessons learned side. Maybe Chris has a good achievement he wants to talk to. I got one as well.
Patrick's got plenty of achievements, so let me interrupt him before. No, I mean maybe to steal some thunder a bit. I am most proud of what Trustpoint's done over the last few years. Right, Patrick and I founded this company, right at the beginning of COVID. Right, January 2020, we kind of kicked things off. We didn't see each other in person more than like once or twice over the next 2 years. Right, we raised money, we hired a team, we landed government contracts. Doing this virtually, right? And that was on the basis of a great partnership, a brilliant idea, and a pursuit of wonderful technology. So, Trustpoint has now built and launched the world's first GPS microsatellite, right? And that is huge. So we're super proud of what's going on at Trustpoint. We are, I don't know if we said this explicitly yet, but our solution is a C-band solution. So we're broadcasting a positioning signal at a new frequency, which is going to add not only better performance, but also allow us to provide some resilience that doesn't exist within the traditional L-band signal. And we are generally believed to be the leaders at the global level at delivering this new capability that's going to affect the world, as Patrick mentioned. So I'm proud of that. That's what I'm proud of. Patrick, do you want to say more about the Trustpoint achievement?
Yeah, I mean, within Trustpoint, I think the biggest accomplishment, of course, is getting this this company off the ground during all of those challenging times of COVID, the chip shortage. There was a VC slump. We were all remote. And so I'm incredibly proud of that. I think that will always be a major highlight of my career. On top of that, I think Trustpoint as a team has a massive success too in sort of sharing and succeeding in changing the dialogue around GNSS and GPS. We have successfully, and this is shown. I was presenting virtually at a conference in Asia a couple of days ago, middle of the night, giving a presentation, and it was the Multi GNSS Asia conference out of Thailand this year, and I was on a panel about sort of next gen technologies with an emphasis on LEO GPS, and it was resounding alignment in the talking points of what the future of GNSS looks like. It is microsatellite based, it is low Earth orbit based, and it is frequency diverse from the heritage L-band signals. And going to a conference even 2 years ago, we were the only ones with those talking points. And we were out there pounding the pavement, knocking on doors, sharing the story, showing the benefits, the analysis, why it works so well. And people are like, oh, that's cool. And it has been incredibly rewarding to see the international community, right? My fellow panelists from Japan, Korea, the European Space Agency, and even folks here in the United States come back with those same talking points. And it might be luck. We timed it really well, right?
Yeah.
And all these things started coming together. But I think we played a large role in changing the conversation, and changing the conversation to an objective outcome that is going to solve a lot of problems. And I'm super proud of that. I think the team, there's definitely a team effort to get through the work to figure out those results and then to communicate it. So I think that's the biggest one within Trustpoint. Yeah, for sure.
It's pretty incredible that you did all of that. Do you know what? Until people say it, I try to forget about the whole COVID time. It was a dark period, wasn't it, in many people's lives? But the fact that you guys started a company, scaled it, won contracts, worked remotely for 2 years, and then you were clearly ahead of the game too with these conversation points. And now, like, everybody in the global community is now starting to talk about it. That's something else. Yeah,
I agree. And Patrick's being slightly modest. He gave a company pitch at the satellite conference last year, and took away first prize as the best story for a space startup. So excited to be celebrating 1 year of that right now.
Amazing, congratulations. And the final, I guess, 2 questions from me today was, these people that we're talking about that wants to access space, and whether they just want to get into space as a job or they want to build their own company or whatever it is, the one constant that I find from doing these podcasts and talking to people is the importance of mentors throughout your careers. And it seems that they can be seasonal. So you have different mentors at different parts of your life and growth. I think a lot of people struggle where to start to even identify a mentor. So it'd be good to hear from you guys, like, what was the importance of mentors to you throughout your career that helped kind of develop to the modern day? How would you advise people to where would they start in identifying a mentor for them in the different stages of their career?
Yeah. I think I had really good success at my first job at Orbital Sciences identifying and sort of recruiting mentors. There were formal programs at Orbital Sciences to kind of match junior employees with more senior folks. I felt like those were sort of always artificial relationships. I think the process to find the best mentors is to be open about what you're trying to do with your career. And sometimes that can be hard, right? Because sometimes the statement is, I want to do something with my career that is not at this company and I need to go elsewhere, right? Yeah. Which is not what your boss wants to hear. But I think there's an initial relationship building step. Show your competence, be on time, get your work done by the due dates, show that you can be trusted, and then ask for help. Say, hey, I know what my job is today, but in 20 years, I want to do X. Right. And if you say, and I think this applies, maybe not 50 years ago, but today, if you go to your boss and say, in 20 years, I want to do X, right? They're likely not thinking, how dare you consider leaving this company, sometime in the next 20 years. They're not thinking that. People move too quick today. Good mentors will look at that and go, cool, what do you want to do? Right. And you can have that open conversation, learn about their career. And if you ask, at least I found in my career, if you ask for advice or growth opportunities, I want more, right? And you've already taken care of the baseline responsibilities of your job, more is available, advice is available. And be an active listener and build those relationships, take an interest in other people's careers and how they got to where they are. Identify people in your company that you would want to emulate later in your career and say, hey, I love what you're doing, right? I want to do X, just like you're doing that today. How did you get here? People want to share their story. Inherently, I think people are helpful. There's obviously going to be times when they're not, but I think that's a big thing is execute your job well, and then don't be afraid to share your interests. I think you'll find the right mentors will gravitate towards those conversations and want to engage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's all spot on. I'll add that you know, Trustpoint as a startup has had the benefit of participating in accelerators that ultimately introduce us to a number of successful folks in the industry, right? We participated in New Space Nexus out of New Mexico. We participated in Creative Destruction Lab, the Space Stream out of Toronto. I know there's the Techstars space group out there. So there are all these paths by which a startup can get very specific advice about the things that they need to get past sort of the early phases. And some of the folks participating as companies have never done this before. They just have great technology or great idea, and the ones that succeed are perhaps the ones that are most receptive to that feedback, as Patrick's suggesting. So just diversifying your engagement with experts by engaging entrepreneurs and operators and angel and venture investors. Like, these communities are a great place to start because people want to help and they want you to succeed. That's been a path that's helped us as a company and me individually.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like, when I say it, like, it seems like such an obvious question, right? But I honestly think that so many people struggle with this point, and like they don't know where to start, in terms of like how do I even find a mentor? Who's the right mentor for me, and all that kind of stuff. And I think inherently as well, like you said there, people do want to help, but I think the perception is like, oh, they're not going to take time out their busy schedule and then running their company to spend time with me and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like I could do an entire segment on how to identify mentors, but it's clearly a really, really important thing. So thanks for sharing that. And I guess the final question from me, by the way, I've loved this episode, guys. Thanks ever so much for coming on. This has been awesome. I feel like I could talk to you all day. The final question for me is, if you two guys could distill everything down from your careers, all of the data you downloaded, all the mentors, everything, if you could distill that down to one piece of advice for this person that we've been talking about that wants to get into space this year and beyond, what would that be?
I think it goes back to my earlier question. In space, you can't optimize around just technology or just finance or just policy. And the fundamental kind of subsequent talking point there is you need a lot of different diverse people to make a space business work, right? Like, Trustpoint is not just a company full of deep technical experts, hacking away in a lab somewhere. All right. We bring backgrounds from government contracting, policy, spectrum, international engagement, product, commercial defense. And within that, I would just say there is going to be room for a lot of different people. Just because you don't have an aerospace degree does not mean you're not going to be sought after in the aerospace industry. So I think my recommendation is, I think you'll be surprised. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for diverse people. And I'd say dive in. There is plenty to go around. The industry is growing. Find some companies, reach out, apply to some jobs. Don't wait. The best time is now.
Awesome. Thank you.
I hate the idea of networking for the sake of networking.
I could not agree more.
Oh man, like Richard, at some point I became an introvert. I'm not sure when, but like if I'm gonna go out there and like shake hands and the germs or whatever, like it's got to be worth it, right? So just like strategically surrounding yourself with good people, finding valuable mentors, advisors, as we talked about, like find the right partners, people who you can add value to, people who can add value to you, people who you enjoy to be around. Like, that's so important. Like, we've got an incredible team at Trustpoint, right?
Yeah.
We've attracted and retained an incredible team that aligns with our culture and our vision, that work extremely hard and smart, and are just a pleasure to be around. Like, building the right team is so critical. So my primary advice is to make yourself part of an awesome team like we have here.
You guys clearly have an amazing culture, and you can really see the passion clearly trickles down from you two guys to the team as well. So it's incredible to see. And on your point there, I feel like I could talk to you all day about this. I've been saying this thing for years around the going to events and networking for the sake of networking, it's like my nightmare. Like the amount of times I've gone to these events, like you mentioned one there in Logan, I absolutely love the small sat. I love Satellite in DC. I love the events, but like the amount of people you come across, you're like, oh, who you meeting? What you doing? They're like, oh, I'm just walking the floor. You know, I'm just here. They don't have any like meetings booked in, nothing. They're just kind of floating it around. I'm like, I couldn't go to like event and just do that for the sake of it. I've got to go there, have the meetings booked in, and be intentional about what I'm doing there.
Yep, I feel that, man. Thank you.
Oh, we get it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, look, guys, thank you so much. Thanks for joining the podcast today. Really, really enjoyed it. Hope it all goes well in DC next week. Enjoy it, and hopefully catch you both on the event circuit this year.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for your time.
Really, thanks for having us, Richard.
Thank you. Take care. Cheers.
All right.